Matt Gaetz of Florida, who sits on the House Judiciary Committee questioning the Google CEO today. So we have to suspend belief that Democrats and Republicans got the facts right, according to Mr. Pichai.
I guess we can believe Mr. Pichai, or we can believe our lying eyes. We see continually the outcomes on Google disfavoring conservatives, and perhaps one of the reasons why Google's CEO has not found bias is because he has not looked for it. Google maintains platforms, chat rooms, Harris, where employees go and discuss their pending actions. We were able to access some of those chat rooms and find discussion of specifically suppressing the Daily Caller and Breitbart and trying to find ways to categorize content as hate speech, even if it's in the comments section of a story, not the story itself. And so if you don't look for something, you probably won't find it. But we see glaring us right in the eye the employees of Google demonstrating their bias in a Google chat room on Google time, planning Google strategies.
Sounds like evidence. We'll move on to the deal with China, also from Mr. Pichai. Everybody else is getting it wrong. And this is important because intellectual property has been stolen from this nation. I mean, if you're doing a deal with China, people want to know about that.
Absolutely, and it's not just China. There are other regimes that limit speech and limit people's rights that Google is very willing to wrap their business model around. There is a hypocrisy, Harris, because in the chat rooms, Google employees talk about that it's their moral obligation to reverse the 2016 election, that there's a moral obligation to stop certain media outlets, but they see no similar moral obligation when they allow governments like the Pakistani government or the Indonesian government or the Chinese government to dictate the terms of their activity in those countries. And so it's a double standard that seems to bite in favor of Google's profits and against a user experience that is neutral.
You know, critics of anybody who would press in this hard with Google would say, you know, we saw what happened with Facebook. And by the way, they had some of the same algorithm allegations against them, against conservatives as well over there. But when you look at this, critics would say, no, you've got to let free speech reign. How do you deal with this without stifling their abilities to be able to do what they do as tech giants?
I do believe that free speech ought to be accessible to people on a neutral platform. There is a special carve-out in American law that says if you are a neutral platform, that you're able to have liability protections against certain lawsuits. It's our contention that Facebook and Google and Twitter no longer are neutral platforms because they elevate content that is beneficial to a liberal outlook and they suppress content that is more conservative in nature. And so they should not be able to access liability protections that even newspapers, that even your network, Fox News, cannot access, but they're able to get them because they're technology companies. They owe the American people neutrality as a consequence of that, and we're seeing more and more evidence that they fall short of that promised neutrality that allows free speech to flourish.
That's really interesting. Yeah, you don't, I guess Google doesn't have to FOIA. To get information, they can move forward. Before you and I part ways, I want to understand if there was anything that came out of today that's actionable in terms of change for the future.
Yeah, the most important thing is that there's got to be an internal investigation at Google to determine whether or not their bias is impacting the search outcomes. I always think government action should be the last resort, so we want to encourage Google to do the right thing. I have to say, I think that the CEO's fallen short of a commitment on that, but this is going to play out in 2020, Harris. And if I could make just a shameless plug, it's one of the reasons I think President Trump should pick Mark Meadows to be his chief of staff, because with all the wars we're going to be fighting, we need the best fighter next to the president.
You got it in. Congressman Matt Gaetz, the great state of Florida, thank you.
Thank you.